Hey everybody, and welcome to part 1 of my hopefully long and prolific C++ beginner tutorial series. I am assuming you are all here because you've heard of this vaunted C++ about its mystical powers and abilities. Well, you've come to the right place if you'd like to learn more about it. What is C++? A real short answer is, what is English? What is Spanish? They're languages. Some people, for example, you go to France and you speak English to them, they're not going to understand English unless they speak English. You would assume someone in France is taught or programmed to speak French. So in order to communicate with them, in order to exchange information with them, you would need to be speaking their language, French. Well, it's very similar with a computer. A computer doesn't understand English for the most part. Now there are some super complicated programs that do, but that's a whole other story. Computers themselves, at their rawest form, do not understand English. Now, you need a way to communicate with a computer. A computer program is, after all, essentially just you giving the computer instructions of what you want it to do. Now, since the computer can't understand English, you're going to have to put those in a form that the computer can understand. For that, we use the language C++. And it's called a language because it really is just a language. It's another way of speaking to communicate with a computer so you can tell it what to do. So it's nice and really simple. And honestly, I know you're going to look at it. It's going to look super complicated. What I've got here is what's called our development environment, which could be very, very intimidating to someone who's never seen something like this before, but I can assure you it's not as complicated as it looks, and it's not going to be very long before you feel right at home here, because we are going to be spending a lot of time here. This is where the bulk of our work is going to be done. So, to begin with, I'm going to cut this part out because I'm not sure. I'm having a brain freeze. So, to begin, you will notice here I am using a development environment called CodeBlocks. It's free, open source. You can get it on the internet at codeblocks.org. If I'm going to assume everybody can figure out how to go to the website, download, and install the thing on their own. If you can't, let me know in a comment or something, and I will go ahead, if there's a big enough demand, and I will put up a video, post instructions, or something like that as far as how to get this thing up and running. But for now, I'm just going to assume that everybody can, or everybody already has it, or has something similar. For the sake of this tutorial, if you really think you're going to be having any sort of difficulty following along, I would suggest you use CodeBlocks instead of, say, Visual Studio, just because it'll be easier if you're seeing the exact same thing I'm seeing. So, we're going to dive right in here. When this tutorial is over, you will have written your very first computer program, a functioning computer program. Now, there's going to be a lot of words and keywords and code and terminology here that you've never heard before, and that's fine. That's called the syntax of the language, exactly what we say, how we say it. So, just ignore the stuff you don't know for now. It will all be explained very shortly, or at least someplace in this tutorial. So, what I'm going to go ahead and do to get us started is create a new project. It's going to bring up the menu right here. I am just going to start an empty project. We're just going to be doing something nice and simple. You know what? Let's start a console application. Go ahead, why not? It'll bring you through the wizard. You're going to be using C++. Come up with a project title. So let's just call this... No, my caps lock's on. Let's just call this my project. Where do you want to create the project? This is going to be fine for me, just the basic C drive. Create a folder for it. This just gives you the file name. This is going to tell you where it will end up with these settings. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. The basic default settings here should all be perfectly fine. If you don't see this, once again, leave me a comment or something, and I will work on getting you all caught up. We can, for now, just go ahead and click Finish, and we have opened our new C++ project. Under Sources, on the left here, you will see main.cpp. Let's go ahead and double-click that to open it. And what has actually already happened is, since we set a console application, CodeBlocks has gone ahead and given us a very, very, very basic computer program already. So let's take a look at the individual components of this program right now, even if we don't understand them all right now. The basic overview is this is what's called a preprocessor command. You'll recognize them because they've started with a little hashtag here. Basically, those are instructions that you're giving to the computer before the program even compiles, before it even starts to run. These are things it knows it needs to do right off the bat. This is the namespace. We specify STD or standard, basically a namespace in C++, and don't worry, you'll be learning in detail about all of these concepts much later. The namespace is just the set of terminology, the set of keywords we're going to be using. Like, for example, let's say cout. It's the command for console out. In this namespace, that's what it is. If the computer sees it, it knows that's what you mean, is to send something out to the console. If you're using a different namespace, however, well, this keyword could be associated with something different. So you're probably not going to be worrying about namespaces for quite some time, so let's just stick to the basics with namespace standard, or STD. Here we've got the open of our main function. A function is basically a set of instructions that carries out a certain, you guessed it, function. We've got the beginning and end marks right here. I have no idea what you call these, but they should be just over and a little to the left of your enter key. You use them to open and close each set of instructions or block. Basically, anytime you're putting more than one action, for example, this, one line of code, into something, you're going to have to use a block so that the compiler knows where everything is, what needs to go together. So right here, inside this function, cout stands for console output. And basically, you type cout. I'll just go ahead and do it for you. You type cout, and then the double, T is helpful, the double less than signs, and then whatever you want to put out, which we're going to go over variables and string literals and all that, but for now, we just want it to put out exactly what we type. So if you ever want it to, now you know what, we'll deal with this in a later lesson. I'm getting ahead of myself here, sorry. We'll just put, for example, hello world, end quotation mark. And then we'll want it to move to a new line, so we're just going to give it a new instruction to end line, or ENDL. You'll notice a lot of the keywords in this language are basically just abbreviations, so with a little bit of thinking you'll be able to figure out what exactly they mean. And CodeBlocks will also give you hints here and there about exactly what should be done, what's going to be expected by the compiler to be done, etc. And then down here, return 0. This is just returning a value from the function. In layman's terms, basically, a function is usually given information, then the function processes that information, and then it returns the result of the function. So, you know, if you send a bunch of raw materials into a factory, and the factory goes ahead and returns a finished product, well, it's very simpler. The factory is the function. There's no data going into the function right here, but normally if there was data going into the function, it would go within these parentheses right here. But for now, we're just going to not be inputting anything into this function. And then the output is the return. This is where the finished product will go. But this is an extremely simple program, about as simple as they come. So it's not taking in any information, processing any information, or returning any information. The only thing it's doing is sending a message to the console window that says hello world, and then putting a new line in. So to see this in action, we've got our finished product here. We're going to go up here to run. Sees, oh, the project hasn't been built yet. That means it hasn't been compiled. Everything hasn't been put in the place it needs to go. I am going to explain that all in the future. So for now, we'll just say yes, go ahead and build it. It debugs, and this is the result. The console window pops up with the message, "Hello World," and then this is what the Windows 7 console returns. It tells you that the process returns 0. How long it took to execute, for me, about half a second. And you press any key, and it goes away. Congratulations, we have just built and run our very first program. Now tune into the next tutorial, and we'll see what we can do about getting a little more advanced.